This video is gonna get demonetized so quickly, so please become a Patreon supporter right now. But I can't not talk about this, because it's just so messed up. Okay, deep breath everyone. I am going to take you into the love lives of Christians who claim to be experts on marital bliss, even though it'll become very clear very quickly that they really have no business giving out that kind of advice. If you don't already know this, one of the many problems with purity culture in evangelical Christian circles is that it teaches young women, and it's always young women, that sex and every single step on the road to penetration is to be avoided at all costs before marriage. No hooking up, no kissing, sometimes no dates without a chaperone or another couple at your side. But then the thinking goes, as soon as you say I do, like literally seconds after you say those words, you're good to go. Sex will be magical and wonderful and perfect, and there's no chance you and your husband might be sexually incompatible, because why would God do that to you? You'll know what to do even though you've avoided learning how to do anything, and you certainly haven't watched anything, and you have no experiences to draw from. So, have fun on the honeymoon, kids! Now, as anyone who's ever had sex or been in relationships, plural, or has just read a book could tell you, that's not how it works. Sometimes two people are on completely different wavelengths. And sometimes there is chemistry, but it takes a while to develop. It's foolish and naive to think two virgins will just figure it out because their first sexual act was a threesome with God after the wedding. Have fun with that mental image. And listen, I am not knocking abstinence if you choose that for yourself. I don't care. What makes me upset is when people act like that's the best and only option for everyone, and everything else means you're a harlot. So, with that in mind, let me introduce you to Dr. Glenn Hill and his wife, Phyllis Hill. They've been married for about 4 decades, and they have a whole ministry where they counsel other couples on how to connect with each other. So far, nothing wrong with that. Seems pretty typical, actually. They were recently interviewed by the pro-abstinence, girl-defined co-host Bethany Beal, whose entire online persona is woman who wore a purity ring until her wedding night.
I was just not attracted at all,
Like
it just
0?
Yeah, I would say 0. I remember when you were walking down the aisle to Zach and you whispered over to me and you were like, I'm not attracted to him, but I'm going for it.
Here I go.
She went from someone who didn't have her first kiss until she and her husband said I do, to someone who now dishes out sex advice like she knows what she's talking about. Whatever you think the time span between those two events is, I promise you it is much shorter than that. She is the equivalent of a 19-year-old telling a 17-year-old what it's like to be an adult. Yeah, you might have some experience, but you probably haven't been through anything. Now, most of the interview is exactly what you'd expect. The Hills say they didn't have sex until their wedding night. He jokes that the 11 seconds wasn't great.
For me, it was the greatest 11 seconds of my life. And I was shocked at how ungrateful my new wife was. I was like, what? That was a big win.
They say it took them a long time to get better at it and start enjoying it, and now they're hoping to help other Christian couples so they don't have the same experience. And again, I think that's fine for them to do, and they're speaking from personal experience, which is helpful. Mock the 11 seconds joke all you want, and I will.
I was like, what? That was a big win.
But I appreciate the brutal honesty. You know what I mean? But here's where things took a strange turn. At one point in the interview, Phyllis talks about how sex was painful and unsatisfying for years. years. And that didn't begin to change until one day, well into their marriage, when the topic came up with another couple they knew. I don't know how it came up, and I have a lot of questions about why it would have come up, but it did. Phyllis said she felt broken, and when the female half of the other couple asked for specifics, as one does at any dinner party, Phyllis said something I was not expecting. And by the way, before I show it to you, I would love to link you to their full discussion, but Girl Defined removed the interview from YouTube. They set the video to private. Why? Probably because of what I'm about to show you, because it's disturbing. And none of these people had any clue how disturbing it was. They also have no clue that I know how to save videos before they're taken down, because I know how these kinds of people operate. So here's the clip, and as you watch it, notice how Bethany just nods along like nothing weird is being said.
But she said, okay, what, can you define broken? What are you saying? What does that mean? And then I just said, oh, well, I don't have a clitoris.
Let's pause there. This woman, who had been married for a while when this presumably happened, believed she could not receive sexual pleasure because she lacked the equipment to do so. That means she never looked for it on herself, never asked a doctor about it, and never tried to do anything to bring herself pleasure. And then, when she got married and gave herself permission to have sex, her husband didn't know enough about what to do to bring her pleasure. Some of that you might learn about if you had decent sex education in school, or at least if you didn't treat masturbation or fooling around as sins to be avoided at all costs. But imagine thinking sex was going to be magical in the context of marriage, to believing it will never be enjoyable for you because you're not having fun and it hurts, to just accepting the idea that it must be part of God's plan. I mean, that is so damn depressing. It's not that I feel bad for these people per se, because they made their choices. They made their bed and now they have to lie in it without, ever making the bed or lying in it. I swear that made sense in my head. But they're gonna treat this as a silly quirk, not a major blind spot in their own development. Okay, back to Phyllis and Glenn.
Glenn had read enough to know that a clitoris was involved and didn't know where it was, but knew that that mattered and that had to do with an orgasm. And it's like, I've never orgasmed and there's no pleasure. I don't enjoy it. Matter of fact, I hate it.
Wow.
I just endure it. We just get through it as fast as possible.
And the couple they're telling all this to was like, we're just trying to eat spaghetti here. Actually, the female friend happened to be in the medical field, so she knew something was wrong with that story. Of course, barring some medical rarity, Phyllis had a clitoris. She even offered to take Phyllis to the bathroom to show her, we're told, but modesty prevented them from doing that. Which I understand because that might be weird, but also I kind of appreciate that the option was on the table. Like, that's a good friend right there. By the way, this is not the point of anything, but I can't believe how everyone just sidesteps how important it was that the female friend was in the medical field. Bethany Beal spends her whole online existence talking about the joys of being a stay-at-home mom. And conservative Christian culture often urges women to pursue motherhood over careers. And I'm not knocking stay-at-home moms. I mean, if you can make that work, fine. But these people were very lucky that a woman in their lives chose medicine. Okay, anyway. That dinner party ended with Phyllis learning nothing, and everyone else, I assume, saying, oh, look at the time, 6 o'clock? Past our bedtime. We'll go to the bathroom together next time. At some point after that discussion, months, years, who knows, Phyllis was with her newborn baby in the company of that same friend, who, to my shock, was still her friend. And yes, that means Phyllis and Glenn had sex enough times to produce a child. even though Phyllis was apparently never getting much joy out of it, and the conception was probably painful. And then she makes a startling admission. And this is where things get messed up. This is probably why the video was made private. Let me send out all the trigger warnings right now, because what you're about to hear is disturbing. And not a single person involved in this interview seems to recognize that.
Phyllis was changing our daughter's diaper, and our friend showed her on our little girl, where the clitoris is located, which was huge information for Phyllis. And again, it's stunning to me. That's pretty darn basic. And we're smart people, and we were clueless.
Wow. As someone with children who at one point were in diapers, I have never used them as my personal anatomy diagrams, much less ways for me to learn about my own body. I sure as hell did not use my infant daughter as a resource to show her grown-ass mother where her clitoris is. Now look, there are people who would say that what these people did was sexual abuse, and others who just see it as a bizarre way to overcome your own ignorance. For the sake of this video, I'll assume it's the latter and just keep talking. But now you know why this video was made private. The problem wasn't that they were clueless. It's that they are conservative Christians with a sex-negative mentality that they still hold to this day, who picked the worst possible way to learn something that other people managed to figure out without the use of an infant. Let's assume the internet was not readily available at that time, several decades ago. They could have checked out an anatomy book from the library. They could have handed a pencil and paper to someone knowledgeable, like maybe a friend in the medical field perhaps, and asked that person to please draw a stick figure with relevant body parts. They could have gone to a doctor or a marriage counselor. They could have rented some adult movies. They could have figured this out prior to marriage. They could have solved this in the beginning of their marriage had they realized sex can have a purpose beyond procreation. Or they could have read their Bibles and looked up what Jesus said about female bodies, because I was told that book has all the answers. So many options. Instead, Phyllis went through several years of painful and unenjoyable sex because no one in their abstinence-obsessed circles ever thought to educate them about what makes sex more pleasurable for her until they got lucky, which I know is a weird word to use here, to have a baby girl to use as an educational tool. I know conservative Christians don't give a damn about bodily autonomy, but Jesus. Nothing about this is admirable. This is not a relationship anyone should strive to imitate. This is not a feel-good story about a couple that worked hard to make their relationship last this long. It's a story about two people who clearly were not mature enough for marriage and sex, jumping into it before they were old enough to understand how their own bodies operated. Want to know what's really messed up? Glenn Hill is a clinical sexologist with a PhD. I had to look this up because I didn't believe it at first, but it turns out he got his master's degree at a Christian college, then his PhD from the now defunct Academy of American Clinical Sexology. I don't know how legit that degree is, but I just want to put that out there. This man gives sex advice to other people. Phyllis said later in the interview that her problem was a lack of knowledge.
We kind of realized it was truly a lack of knowledge.
Which, you know what? Fair. Just about everyone is ignorant about sex when they first have it. But at no point in this conversation does anyone suggest the couple would have been better off exploring each other's bodies before marriage and just learning how to please each other. They never admit that purity culture itself is broken, or that it contributed to their ignorance, or that it's beyond messed up to sexualize a child because of the curiosity of her parents. More importantly, they offer no practical solutions for young Christians to avoid the very problems they created for themselves. Being married for a long time doesn't mean your marriage or your sex life is any good. Longevity should never be your goal in a relationship. Happiness should be. And if that means you stick together for several decades, wonderful, more power to you. The irony of this interview, though, is that Bethany Beal herself is no expert on the subject matter either, yet her whole shtick is coaching other young Christian women on topics like sex and marriage. This interview is built on the premise that Beal, who likes to think she's an expert in everything, is going to speak with an older couple who must know everything about sex and marriage in order to educate her audience. It's an entire ministry of the blind leading the blind, or at least the ignorant leading the ignorant, at a time when what they all really need is actual expertise. Personal anecdotes are not an acceptable substitute. Yet even when the consequences of their lack of knowledge becomes crystal clear, it's treated like a perfectly normal thing. Can you imagine what these same people would say if a gay couple said they treated their adopted baby boy the same way these people treated their little girl? I have a guess. It's not good. Moral of the story: never get sex advice from people who refuse to learn about it until it's way too late. And also, if you put it on the internet, it's never really gonna disappear.